Welcome to Martini Monday. Today we have a really exciting one. I'm finally going to be going through and ranking all the eyeshadow palettes that I tried for the very first time in 2023. Yes, I know we're already in March, but I'm still doing this. Happy Martini Monday. Every single time I make an espresso martini for Martini Monday, which I've done a couple of times by now prior to this, it turns out perfect. Like the foam is gorgeous. And then of course, because I take too long to get myself all set up, the foam disappears. I promise. It was beautiful like 5-10 minutes ago. And I haven't even tried it. Ooh, that's yummy. Teeny tiny bit too sweet for my taste today. I guess I overdid it on the coffee liquor, espresso liquor, whatever it's called. But in any case, still delicious. I'm still gonna enjoy it. How are you guys doing? Let me know in the comments. We're going to venture on my ranking of 2023 eyeshadow palettes. Yes, I know everyone else has done this 2 or 3 months ago, but you know what? I wasn't fully discouraged posting this video because I've seen a few people do this in the past 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm not the only one that's late to the party. And I figured it's gonna give me a reason to talk about eyeshadow palettes. And I will take any reason to talk about eyeshadow palettes. Not to mention, for those of you that are new here, hi, welcome. My name is Natalia. I'm a concert pianist who loves all things makeup and beauty. And the year of 2024 is where I want to discover and rediscover as many of the products that I already own as possible. So what could be more perfect than revisiting all the palettes that I tried last year and ranking them, because that's fun. So if you're here for ranking videos, for chit chat videos, for project pan videos, shop my stash style videos, just a lot of fun content that doesn't always revolve around the very latest releases, which I think we need more of to look back and see what we already have, then I hope that you will stick around and subscribe and join us here. Also, if you're new here, once in a while, I do a Martini Monday. It's something I would of course love to do every Monday, but I don't always have the time. I don't always have the time to film in time for a Monday. Not to mention, I don't even always have the time to make myself a martini every week. So there's that. But cheers again as I gather up some fuel before we jump into this ranking. It's not going to be massive. Last year I wore makeup on and off, and there was quite a few months of the year where I wasn't on YouTube and I barely wore any makeup at all. So I only have, I think, 19 palettes to rank today. I wrote out some stuff all throughout last year, so some of it hopefully will come back to me. That's the only thing about doing this late in the game is I'm worried I might not remember all my thoughts on all these palettes because some of them I haven't revisited since last year, but I'm gonna do my best. And again, as I said, this is all just for fun. This is for me to rediscover some of these palettes. I'm hoping this video is gonna inspire me to pull some of these back out for the spring, because actually some of them have really great springy color stories. Let's not ramble any further because we know I like to do that. I'm going to mostly go off the cuff with my thoughts. If I need to refer to my notes once in a while because I'm stumped, I will. In the 19th place is this Charlotte Tilbury Easy Eye Palette for the Charlotte Darling look. So this is the mini eye palette with 2 easy to wear eye looks. I have no idea what this is officially called. Does this have like a name? Is it just called Easy Eye Palette? I got this in my Beautylish 2023 lucky bag. And you will see my eyeshadow palette declutter is quite possibly going to be the next video after this one. You will see that, you know, spoiler, this is one of the palettes I do declutter. I held on to it just for this video. I've already actually given away quite a lot of the palettes that I decluttered. Still have some lying around that haven't found a home, and this of course is one of them because I decided to keep it for this video. So you will see that, you know, in theory it looks like a very nice, simple, as it says, easy eye palette. And I was so excited when I got this because I like color, but to be honest, I feel much more at home, much more comfortable with neutral looks. And of course, if I am wearing makeup in my daily life, I don't usually have a lot of time for elaborate looks and lots of color. It's something I will occasionally do, like in makeup playtime, or I'll do it for a video. Once in a blue moon, when I have the extra time, I will do it for actually going out. Most of the time, I am neutral at heart. So this seemed perfect, except this was so new neutral and so blah. And I didn't think the formula was all that great. It just, I mean, I really can't think of a better word other than blah. This was such a blah palette. And considering that it's Charlotte Tilbury and it is expensive, I just thought that this is like the most overrated. I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard a lot of people rave about this, but just in general, like if this is the eyeshadow formula that Charlotte Tilbury is putting her foot forward with, then I think it is extremely overrated. I think she really needs to step up her game. I did not think this was great at all. I tried to use it, I think just 2 times, and I was so bored. And you will see that I will have some very neutral palettes very high up in the ranking here today, but this was not it. And the next few palettes maybe were even worse in some ways, either due to quality or again due to just how uninspiring they were. But because of how costly this is, I had to put this in last place because it's uninspiring. You can only create just 1 or 2 looks at best. There's no depth. It's all like almost a monochromatic situation. And on top of that, it is ridiculously expensive. So this was a no-brainer. This definitely went directly into the last place. Next, we have a palette from Glossier. This is the Monochromes Essential Eyeshadow Trio in Almond. I think I found this at TJ Maxx or Marshall's. I don't remember what these are full price. To be honest, I don't even remember what I paid for it. I want to say about $10. I thought this would be a great, like, easy 2 and done out the door because I was getting more into that in 2023. I was trying to, on occasion, wear makeup a little more often, but do the simple 1 or 2 eyeshadow looks so that I'm not spending a lot of time on makeup. And I am continuing to try to do that more often in 2024 because I'm usually an all or nothing kind of person. I either will just not bother wearing makeup at all or I would do the full beat. And I'm trying to be somewhere in between. So I got this because it really intrigued me. Plus I like the idea of having 3 totally different formulas but in exactly the same color, hence the monochromes. I get the premise. And maybe I set myself up for failure with this because again, like this was so boring. I think I expected the formulas to be more interesting. It wasn't even just that it was the same shade in 3 different formulas that disappointed me because, you know, I have eyes. Clearly, when I opened it, I understood what's happening. But I just didn't feel like these 2 shimmers were different enough. I mean, yes, this is the more sparkly topper, and this, of course, is the more like of the traditional shimmer. I have such better quality eyeshadows in my collection that this really disappointed me. So hence the 18th place. And kind of similar to this. This is the Lila Be Fabulous Palette Perfection Eye Quad. The reason this won over the Glossier is because it does have a little bit more variety and obviously there's some depth to this. So you could do something a little bit more interesting. Obviously, you could do very smoky with something like this. But to be honest, it was the formula here that really I didn't love. I thought that the pigment wasn't there. It's even if you build it, it just doesn't, it keeps blending away and disappearing. I really just didn't like the experience of using it. I thought it just faded away quickly afterwards, and I tried it a few times and then honestly I just gave up on it. I mean, the color story to me seemed very appealing when I got this. This was right before I think Lila B went out of business, and I had always wanted to try Lila B for years and years. I always loved these compacts. I heard great things about the blushes in these compacts. So when I stumbled, I can't remember, maybe this was also TJ Maxx or Marshall's, or maybe I bought it online on clearance. But when I stumbled upon this, I was like, ooh, finally I get a chance to try Lila B. And this palette, unfortunately, really disappointed me. I'm obviously not going to swatch anything. You guys can see the colors. Like I'm not reviewing in depth these palettes. I'm just kind of giving you general thoughts. So hopefully that's okay. If in the future when I do videos about eyeshadow palettes, you guys want me to do swatches, let me know. I know a lot of YouTubers do that, but Also, a lot of them have much better equipment. I film just on my phone with really not great lighting, so I don't know how true to color things will be, but I'm happy to improve over time. So if you want to give me feedback, by all means. Next up is what used to be one of my favorite eyeshadow brands, and it's just unfortunately been quite a few years since they've done anything super interesting. I'm talking about Lorac. I used to love Lorac. Part of me still does. I don't know if it's the nostalgic part of me. I don't know why I still have such a soft spot for Lorac, but I used to have almost all of their palettes. And this is the Mercari palette, I'm guessing is how you say that. This is, they revamped all their palettes a few years ago, and this was one of the newer palettes that they came out with. They used to do always a layout where they would have all the mattes on one side, like on the bottom, and all the shimmers on top, and here they decided to do, because there's 5 rows, 1 row of each. So I still think the layout is fantastic. Obviously there's tons of neutrals to choose from. If it wasn't for the formula, this would rank much higher. And surprisingly enough, because I've always loved Lorac mattes, surprisingly enough, it is the mattes that I am ranking these a little bit lower for. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the couple of times that, because I only used this a few times last year, maybe I just chose the wrong colors, maybe I had a bad day, who knows, but Lorac's always had very powdery eyeshadows, but I feel like these are extra powdery, and because of that, I just felt like there was more fallout. They still blend very nice, as Lorac shadows usually always do. I do have to say, I shouldn't say this is all about the mattes. I think because this is already their revamped formula, I expected a little bit more from the shimmers. Yes, they are slightly more amped up than their old pro palettes. If you've been around in the beauty community, you probably know which ones I'm referring to. But it's still, in comparison to what most other brands are coming out with right now, this still, unfortunately, does not hold its own in the pool of amazing eyeshadow formulas that we have nowadays. So while I you know, again, spoiler, I didn't get rid of this palette, I did keep it. I still definitely want to give it more tries, more chances. I want to try more colors. Overall, it just left me a little bit underwhelmed, so I couldn't in good conscience put it much higher on this list, unfortunately. And to be honest, there's nobody more heartbroken than me about that, because I'm always rooting for Lorac. I feel like I'm the only one, but I really am always rooting for Lorac. In 15th place, I think I'm up to 15, we have the Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. And I know a lot of these are not new palettes at all. They were just palettes I tried for the very first time in 2023. So this was one of the palettes I had had for a lot longer. I have a large, unfortunately, number of palettes sitting around in my basket of shame, as I jokingly call it. And this was one of them. And I was so excited for this palette. And I don't know why I kept putting off using it, but if you haven't seen it, this is what she looks like. I am still so excited about this color story. I really love the color story. There's so much variety in this palette. There are so many looks that I can create, whether I go row by row, column by column. You can find little quads throughout. You can mix and match. I mean, there's an unlimited number of combinations here. Okay, I'm exaggerating. Clearly, there is a limited number of combinations there because, you know, 20 shadows. Do the math. But I unfortunately am just not sure if I can make this palette work. And I've heard several people say the same thing. These shimmers, which when they go on look magnificent. I mean, some of the looks initially were so stunning. I tried this palette several times because I still really want to make it work. But unfortunately, because they are more of that putty, soft formula, they crease on me. And I have very dry skin. Yes, my eyelids are not quite as dry unless I'm going through an eczema flare-up. They're not oily either, but I guess they're like normal. I don't often have creasing issues, especially if I prime my eyes correctly. And this palette, every single time that I used it, would crease. Sometimes more than others, because of course after the first time I made more effort, but still, it still would crease. And that is such a bummer. I'm keeping keeping this palette for now because I do still want to give it more chances and at least use every shade before I decide whether I'm gonna eventually declutter it or not. But that is why this is number 15. I'm sure this would have been so much higher because I really loved using it in the process. I loved creating the looks. I thought the looks that I did were beautiful, but unfortunately the longevity after that is just not there. It's not even that they fade so much, although maybe a little bit, it just creases, which, you know, once your shadows crease, not only does that not look great, but it actually creates that effect of fading even more so. At least I find on me because I have hooded eyes and, you know, I'm in my 40s, so of course lots of wrinkles and creases and all of that. It doesn't help, but other eyeshadows don't do that, so it's a bummer. Next two palettes, I honestly wasn't sure how to rank because one of them I like the quality of better, but I've only used a couple of shades. And then the other one I used more. So that is why I actually went with What's Up Beauty Geodes. Is this the Geodes? Yes, this is the Geodes palette in the 14th slot. Not because this is not a great palette, but because I haven't used it very often. I only used maybe like 4, but I think I've only used it 2 or 3 times. And there was one shade, this rose quartz shade right here, that I'm still not quite sure of. I need to use it again. I'm worried that it's gonna either hard pan on me or some such thing. The other shades, the shimmers especially, I really loved in here. The mattes, I think I only tried 1 or 2. I may have only tried 1 matte, and that's partially why I'm ranking it a little bit lower because I just don't have full thoughts on this yet. I was just consulting my notes. I don't really have too much written for this because I didn't use it all that much. I just wrote also that shimmers are really, really beautiful. So yeah. Okay, and then next is the MAC Feast Your Eyes? Yeah, Feast Your Eyes. Gorgeous packaging. I definitely was sold on the packaging and this embossing on the shades. I don't know if you guys can see. Some of them are still mostly intact. This is just visually such a stunning palette. It was really pretty overall. The only issue I had with this palette is that the mattes needed a lot of building up. They really didn't show up as they look in the pan unless you really had to go back in multiple times. So, you know, that's not the most awful thing, but like for a quick and easy eye look, this wouldn't be my go-to. This is something I would have to work with. Whereas I have to say, going back to that Lorac palette, as much as I was slightly uninspired by it and thought that those mattes were overly powdery, as long as, you know, you tap it off and whatnot, blendability was still there. Like that is definitely a quick and easy eye look right there. It was disappointing for other reasons. I guess no palette is perfect, and this is just how I decided to rank it. All of this can change at any moment of me using these again. I could change my mind because I could find other ways of blending, of applying, using a different brush. You know, there's so many factors.
Okay, what are we up to? 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12.
In 12th place, I actually put this little tiny baby. This is the Urban Decay. The big one was Stone Vibes, I think. Do I have it written out? Yeah, I just wrote Stone Vibes Mini. So maybe that's what this is called, the Stone Vibes Mini. I was so pleasantly surprised by this palette, and I know it's coming in 12th place, but you know, 12 out of 19 is really not bad because I don't have too many bad palettes, especially at this point, right? It was really like the bottom 3 or so that I just disliked. Everything else is okay, workable, and this was a shocker to me. I really didn't expect to like this as much as I did. I love the fact that there's 3 completely different mattes of different ranges of depth. This deep brown really makes the palette more cohesive. I love that. I understand this won't work for everybody, but for me, being as pale as I am, I always love to have a very light shade either for setting my eyelid before going in with something else or for blending things out. I can mix these two if I want a brown transition and I don't want a pink one or a mauve one. And then I just loved these shimmers. I used them even for little pops of color on my inner corner. I used them as topper shades on top of other eye looks, and that's not something I do very often. I'm usually a one palette kind of girl, but this one I even took with me, I believe, when I went to Vegas in December for the Creators and and friends holiday party. I think I brought like 2 palettes with me, this one and another one you guys will see further up in the ranking. So that tells you something, like if I even chose this to travel with. I really enjoyed this palette. I was surprised. Okay, in 11th place, I have the Pat McGrath Bridgerton, the original one. I found this at TJ Maxx, and I think I actually used this palette in a video I posted in early December when I came back to YouTube. I did a get ready with me, kind of explaining a little bit where I had been, why I left, and the fact that I was returning. And this was the palette I had used at that point for the very first time. And while I am not blown away by this palette, I do think that it has a few really nice things going for it. First of all, the blending and the ease of use is definitely there. Really, the only minus for me in this palette is these reds and pinks. Reds and pinks is not something I wear very often to begin with. Plus, I just didn't think, I don't know, I just didn't think the quality was Pat McGrath quality on these 2 shades. However, these 3, stunning. This matte blended like a dream. This shimmer, even though it's not a super sparkly one, it's a very traditional shimmer, but it was so gorgeous. Same with this. And actually, I kind of like the idea of having this very sparkly topper shade. Yeah, it's really just these 2 shades that I'm kind of very take it or leave it about. But overall, it's still a palette I would like to explore more. I still really enjoyed using it the few times that I did. And I did feel like it, you know, it belonged in the middle of this list, which is exactly why I put it. So in 10th, we're in the top 10. In 10th place, I have the Melt Amor Mariposas palette. This palette is absolutely beautiful. There's such a great variety of shades here. My only issue with it, and it could be just a me issue, is I struggle a little bit to blend these bright colors. Maybe because I've lately been more into neutrals, and of course they're a lot easier. You don't have to be as careful with tapping pigment off, buffing it out more or whatnot. I don't know. I found that this was a little bit tricky to work with. I have not tried every shade by any means. I mean, we'd be lucky if I used half of this palette so far. I only created a handful of looks. So I definitely still have a long way to go, I think, with this palette before I make any sort of final decisions on whether it belongs in my collection or not. But I do remember very much enjoying it, just on occasion, depending on which colors I used, struggling a little bit with the blending. Going back and just reading over my notes, and the only time I marked anything for this was the first time I used it, which was in March of 2023. And then I had used it a few other times, but I didn't write anything for them. And I just wrote beautiful shades and fun look, but had a bit of a struggle with the blending. Need to use again. So yeah, so then I did use it again and still had a little bit of an issue with blending, but very much still enjoyed it. Number 9, BH Blueberry Muffin. I'm sure I'm the last one to use this because I only tried it finally in 2023, even though I had it, not since it released, but definitely since whatever year it released in. I have to say I really enjoyed it. I know not everybody loves the BH formula, although this is one of the palettes that most people tend to have pretty good things to say about. I thought the mattes blended very nice. I thought it was easy to use. I really enjoyed the shimmers. Again, not all of them are bada bing, bada boom, but quite a few of them actually have a good amount of sparkle. For such an affordable palette, I don't know if BH even sells these palettes anymore, these brunch palettes, and then they have the whole travel series that they used to do. Obviously, since they've come out with this palette, they declared for bankruptcy, then they were bought out by Makeup Revolution, and they've kind of been stagnant ever since. But this is a great palette. I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to use it some more. I also really like the fact that this is a neutral palette with blues. It's not just a blue palette. That really makes it much more approachable for somebody like me. I do wear blues on occasion, but it's usually an eyeshadow color I'll wear on camera a lot more than I will in my daily life, to be honest. Whereas this palette, I actually could see myself use and, you know, do a pop of blue or a pop of lavender or something, meanwhile having a primarily neutral look. So I think that's the great thing about this palette, is it can go so many different ways and it is very versatile. You can create soft looks, you create very dramatic looks, you get the gist. In 8th place, we have first of 3, I believe, Natasha Denona palettes. This was another palette I received in my 2023 Beautylish Lucky Bag, and I really enjoyed this palette. And these are the reasons for why I say I really am a neutral gal at heart, and I'm really trying to wear makeup a little more often here and there. Still it's not happening as often as I'd like. Most of the time I'm just running too late and I have no time to put on makeup, and if I am going somewhere it still ends up rushed. So palettes like this come in so handy. I really enjoyed the eyeshadows. I thought the eyeshadows were beautiful. These sparkly shimmers are probably the first time I tried this formula from Natasha Denona. I feel like this was the palette where she really started venturing into more sparkly shimmers, because prior to that she had beautiful shimmers, and I still have a bunch of those palettes too, but I feel like these had that wet effect for the first time. Like you can even see it in the pan. It's just so reflective. The mattes are her traditional matte formula. These I don't believe are the cream to powders, if I remember correctly. I think they're just her regular mattes, which I very much enjoy. I probably enjoy those more actually than her cream to powders. And then these face products, they weren't my favorite, but very usable and very handy to have if, again, I'm in a hurry and I just need to have everything in one place so that it's a very quick process. So I am super excited that I have this palette. Really enjoyed using it in 2023, and this reminds me that I really need to use it some more in 2024. In 7th place, I have the Glamlite Dirty Martini. I bought the whole collection. I think it came out in October of 2021. The reason I know that is just due to life events around that time, and this was something I bought to cheer myself up. I bought the entire, I think it was called the Happy Hour collection. I have since given some things away. I don't have the whole entire collection anymore, but this palette I finally used in 2023 for the first time. I think I used it like right at the start of the year in January of 2023. And I do have to say I really enjoy this palette. The only thing I don't love about it, it is a lot of mid-tone shades. You know, there is definitely depth, but again, for me, being as pale as I am, I would have loved one more lighter brown matte and one light shimmer, because the lightest shimmer here is maybe like this teal green, and then I guess this more coppery. I would have loved like maybe not a champagne, but like a pearlescent color with a tinge of green or something, with like a little bit of a green shift, something that I could either put in my inner corner or throw on the center of the lid for a little pop. I just find that this doesn't have enough variety. That is my only issue with this palette. Other than that, I've really enjoyed using it. I loved the looks I created. I thought both the mattes and the shimmers work really well. Is it the most fantastic formula in the world? No, and I've heard that Glamlite, since this, has done a lot better. I actually have several of their newer palettes that are in my basket of shame that I'm hoping to try this upcoming year, maybe in my end of the year ranking, or if I start doing monthly rankings again, you guys will hear me talk about other palettes from Glamlite. But this was the one I tried in 2023, and clearly I enjoyed it because it was in 7th place. Next two palettes also I really struggled with. They were very similar in terms of how much I enjoyed them. I was going back and forth about which one I think deserves the 6th place and which one deserves the 5th place. I'm just gonna go with what, because I wrote this out for myself months ago, like the order back I think in beginning of January or even end of December. So I'm just gonna go based off that because, you know, I also had fresher thoughts back then. 6th place goes to Natasha Denona Yucca palette. Yucca. Now I again can't remember. I'm so sorry. And I think the only reason the next palette won out, I haven't opened the next palette in a hot minute, so I could be wrong. Maybe I'm gonna be taking my words back in a minute, but I think the other palette just had a little bit more depth, variety. So this palette has a beautiful color story. I love greens and neutrals, obviously browns tones. And this is a color story that I think is absolutely gorgeous. I do have to say this green shade, this Calathea, it's a plant, but I never know if it's Calathea or Calathea. I always forget. This is a cream to powder. It is one of those shades where like if you swatch it, it starts forming hard pan. So that's kind of a bummer because I love swatching my palettes even when I'm not filming, just for fun sometimes. So that shade I'm skeptical of. I think this palette has fantastic shimmers, just magnificent shimmers. I love the shimmers in this palette, and that's what I mean by there's older Natasha Denona formulas and then there's newer Natasha Denona formulas. These are absolutely stunning. The mattes are beautiful too. I just didn't think they all blend equally. I think there was a couple that were a little harder to blend, and with the exception of this really bright neon up here, for me, there's not enough depth, variety, especially on the lighter end of things. Although, to be honest, I could have maybe used one darker shade too, because this one doesn't really show up as deep on the eye as it looks in the pan. We only have one brown here that's not even as deep as it could have been, and it's everything here is with a little bit of an olive undertone, so it's not actually a true brown, which is fine, but I still think it could have been a little darker. And then of course there's the willow shade, but again, you're not going to use that for every look. There needs to be a more neutral color with lots of depth. And then we have like Tipo and Acacia, which are a little bit too similar. I don't know. I would have liked one light matte, one deeper matte, and cream to powders that are not threatening to hard pan on me any moment. That's my only gripe with this palette. And now that I've looked at it again and saw the potential hard pan, because I think both of these shades actually have hard pan, I remembered why this came in 6th place and the next palette came in 5th. So in 5th place in that case, top 5 guys, top 5, my top 5 of 2023. Nomad Akavango Safari. I keep the box because I think it is absolutely stunning, and I personally prefer this to this, but that's just because I'm not really too much into animal print. This is not really me. The soft touch is okay. Again, I could do without the soft touch. Like if this palette had this picture, oh my god, just like the new one that just came out, or it's actually, I think it's going to be available if I post this video tomorrow, because I'm filming this a late Sunday night in hopes that Monday you guys will see it for Martini Monday. I believe on Tuesday, Nomad is launching the new Ireland, I can't remember the name of it. It's like something way. I've never been to Ireland, so I'm blanking on the name. Regardless, they're releasing their new Ireland palette, which looks gorgeous. I just don't think I'm gonna get it right now because of the amount of palettes I have yet to try already here. But it's a similar thing because I've been watching videos on that palette where the outside box, stunning, absolutely stunning, and then the inside, as beautiful as it is just a really nice solid green, this soft feel, soft touch type palette. I really wish sometimes they would put these designs on the palettes, but that's this neither here nor there. We want to see the palette. This is such a beautiful palette, and this honestly has some of the best mattes. Some of the best mattes I tried in 2023. I loved the mattes in this palette, and in general, Nomad usually has fantastic mattes, but I don't know, I feel like in this palette, they were just mind-blowing. They were so easy to use, blended so evenly. Chef's kiss, absolutely chef's kiss. I love these mattes, and while there isn't like a skin color, bone color for me, this is a great transition. We have the deep brown, which I always love. So yeah, you can see that as far as the mattes, so that's this row, and that row, while there aren't any super light ones, so again, a little bit of a minus, but there is definitely depth. There's some really beautiful deep shades. There's almost black, this gorgeous deep brown, and then there's some lighter transitions. And the shimmers I liked in the Natasha Denona palette better. If I could combine those two palettes, like the Yucca and this one, into one, perfect. My perfect neutral green palette. But I just thought there was still tons of variety here. I love that we have even a cool tone gray shimmer, this beautiful taupey brown, gold, a copper, like a rosy copper. I don't even know how to describe that shade. And then of course a green, like a mossy green. I love this palette. I used it so much over the summer when it released. Really enjoyed it. So this had to be in my top 5. And yes, this is one of the few palettes I do save the box for because I really love this box. Not to mention, I mean, I haven't been to Okavango Safari because I've only been to South Africa in Africa. It still holds a special place in my heart because I loved the 2 times I've gone to South Africa. Just absolutely stunning country, and I'm sure other parts of Africa are just as beautiful, if not more so. Okay, in 4th place, this is an old palette. In fact, I think this was the very first Mothership Pat McGrath ever released, but I only finally got my hands on it a couple of years back and tried it for the first time in 2023. This is Mothership 1 Subliminal. Guys, when I tell you I loved using this palette, this is such an incredible palette. It is cool tone neutrals. It has some amazing shimmers. It's just so easy to use. The mattes are glorious. They just blend, as people used to say in old YouTube days, they blend like butter and they just blend themselves. So yes, and yes. Even the regular shimmers I think are stunning. This is just, I don't even know what to say about this palette other than it is absolutely sublime. Subliminal is a good name for it. Absolutely. Let's see what I wrote. Mattes were amazing. Barely had to do anything. I told you, they blended themselves. Special, I did write special shades do have fallout. I mean, there's a lot of glitter there, so I'm not surprised. But I loved this palette. I mean, clearly, 4th place. This palette must have done something right. 3rd place, I was a bit torn putting this palette in the 3rd place because, to be honest, I had used it at the very end of 2023. I used it on the 31st because it was the palette I wore for New Year's Eve. And I have since only used it one other time, but that's already in 2024. So in some ways I'm cheating with this palette, but I really wanted to talk about it. And I loved using it so much. Even if we just take that New Year's Eve look, that I couldn't put it in 1st place. Not to mention the color story is not something I would use on a daily basis. So with that in mind, I wouldn't have put it in 1st place. But it maybe would have been in 2nd place, except I only used it once. And that's the Adept inspired palette. I got this right before New Year's, and I was so excited that I decided to wear this for New Year's Eve. And my God, when I tell you, I only have one other Adept palette. It's the Heather Austin one. And before I got this one, like now it's going to be a toss-up between which one I prefer. I would have to use both of them more. But when I tell you these are probably the most incredible shimmers I have in my collection, I love these shimmers. They are so sparkly and so gorgeous. And they are also like a little bit of a softer formula, but these don't crease on me. At least not the 2 or 3 that I've used so far. I obviously have to play with these more, but I couldn't resist. I had to put it in the top 5. We'll see how much I use this upcoming year. Obviously, it's not going to be in my ranking because it's not going to be a palette I tried for the first time in 2024, but hopefully I'll throw it into like a favorites video, even though I don't do those very often. Or as I said, maybe I'll do some like mini rankings along the way if you guys are interested. I am so excited to play with this again. I wish I had more eyes and more energy and more days to just sit around and constantly be playing with eyeshadow. Okay, we have only 2 palettes left. In the 2nd spot, and again, this is not a palette that released in 2023. I think, let's see, which palettes released in 2023? Definitely the Yucca Okavango Safari, I believe the Adept palette, and one other coming up. But that might be it. Everything else is just something I tried for the first time. So this was a holiday palette from none other than Pat McGrath. This is a holiday palette from 2020, was it 2? Maybe 2022 or 2021, 22. I can't remember, guys. I'm so sorry. This is the Mothership Mega Celestial Odyssey palette. This is the one where the layout is a little bit, it's not all straight, and some people really didn't like it. I don't know why I waited so long to finally try this palette. When I tell you I had such a blast using this palette, there's no special shades necessarily in here, but I think Pat McGrath's regular shimmers are so beautiful, and her mattes Her mattes are just unbelievable. I wish there were more of them in here. There's only 4 mattes in this palette. That is the only downside. And of course, they're all mid-tone, but that's okay. I'm gonna overlook it because the quality is there. The variety is there. Every look I created was just absolutely stunning. The whole process of using it was just so pleasant. You know, when you have good quality eyeshadows, you just enjoy putting on your makeup so much more. Don't get me wrong, I can make almost any eyeshadow palette work. I won't give up. I will try to blend more and reapply and spray things down. Really, there's a time and a place for everything. I think sometimes it's fun to be challenged and try to make really nice looks with mediocre eyeshadows. But then when you use a really nice formula, it's kind of like, you know, as pianists, a lot of times my colleagues and I and my friends and I talk about this. When you're in practice mode, you don't always get the best instrument. And obviously, if you can make things happen on a mediocre instrument, then when you go to an amazing one, the experience is just so incredible because you just sit down and suddenly everything that you wanted to create just works because the instrument responds to you immediately in exactly the way that you want it to. I don't mean to compare, obviously, eyeshadow to grand pianos, especially as a pianist. Clearly, I have affection for one much more so over the other. But if I had to make an analogy that makes sense to me, that would be it. Pat McGrath is like the Steinway of grand pianos. Really loved this palette. And now, drum roll please. Wait. Let's have a sip of the martini before it's completely warm. My number 1 of 2023. Some of you might not be surprised, especially if you know me behind the scenes. And also if, you know, you've been paying attention to the fact that I complain a lot about being too pasty white and a lot of shades just pulling too dark on me. With that in mind, I think this palette is like my perfect neutral palette at the moment. It's the I Need a Nude. It's the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. Yes, I know to some people this might be so boring, but I used this palette the most out of everything in 2023. Once this released and I got my hands on it, there was almost no other palette that I wanted to reach for. So that is what I'm basing this number 1 ranking on. This was the palette that was just always in my bag, on my desk. This traveled to Vegas with me. This I wore on stage multiple times because I wear a bright, bold red lip on stage, but I still want my eye look to be poppin'. I don't necessarily want a ton of color, although I do that sometimes too, but the shimmers here, there's some that are really sparkly. There's quite a few different formulas, some that are just smooth, nice shimmers, and some that are much more blingy. There's a few topper shades here. The mattes are all the non-cream to powder formula, which I'm discovering more and more. I really do prefer her regular matte formula. I really, really enjoy this palette, and I had to fight the urge to just keep using only this palette. I, for now in 2024, kind of have put it away because I'm worried that if it sits around within visible, what's the word I'm looking for? Within visible orbit of where I am, then I'm going to pull for this. Yeah, this is definitely my number 1 palette of 2023. And that is my 2023 eyeshadow palette ranking. I'm sorry if I didn't get too in depth as far as the reviews. As I said, I didn't even wear makeup all that much throughout a good chunk of last year. Some of the things because I wasn't on YouTube and I wasn't talking about makeup all the time. Some of my thoughts I'm sure I have forgotten, but I tried to, you know, give you guys at least a general idea of why I like these palettes. If you have any additional questions or comments, or if you want to let me know how you liked some of these, maybe we have similar or different opinions, I'd love to have a conversation down below. And other than that, I thank you so much for being here and for watching and supporting me. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would consider subscribing, and I hope that you guys are all doing really, really well. I hope that you're continuing to stay safe and healthy. Take care of yourselves and those around you, and I can't wait to see you guys in my next video. Cheers and bye guys.